time already, sure is. I don't know where that half hour went. So I don't know where that half hour
What
went.
half hour?
It's the last one.
Have you been here?
I just got here a few minutes after 7, and all of a sudden it's whoop, 7:30.
Oh, shoot. Is it 7:30 already? Here.
I'm just curious. Nothing's life-threatening.
Oh, shit.
I mean, I hope not.
I'll just roll you off the stairs.
Can we act a little more professional, please?
He's trying to hide my chair.
Kinks out of it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. And our first item up tonight is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers presentation. Staff?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. This evening I have Brian Rast with the Corps of Engineers here. He's going to give you guys a report on a flood study that was conducted along Spring Creek. It's been about a 2-year project. It was actually applied for by Amber. And then as I moved up, I took that project over, but it was through a BRIC grant. It was Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant that we got money for to do a flood study along Spring Creek. We started actually with Mission Creek, but that didn't meet the criteria, so then that's where it switched to was Spring Creek. We also did the work with the Kansas Department of Water Resources, the Kansas Division of Emergency Management, and many others, and then the Corps of Engineers. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Councilman, Councilwoman too. The Corps of Engineers has a program called Floodplain Management Services, and my name is Brian Rast, and I've been working with that program with the Corps of Engineers Kansas City District since about 2004. And among the things that we do includes partnering with other agencies, including KDEM, the Kansas Division of Emergency Management, Division of Water Resources in Kansas also, and many other teams. And we do that in the forum of the Kansas Hazard Mitigation Team. And we've been doing what we call Silver Jackets activities since about 2011, and which is sort of a new thing that I'm going to tell you about. But it led to the help that Mark mentioned, which originally started with some FEMA funding through a BRIC grant to 2006 buyouts. And that was actually a disaster grant, but they now have this Building Resilient Infrastructure for Communities grants too, that we want to set the stage for you all to understand how to use that from FEMA. I'm from the Corps of Engineers though, and so I'm going to talk about what we can bring to help you guys out, and we'll go from there. Next slide. So I'll tell you exactly what the Silver Jackets is, so you have a little bit of understanding of it, and then we'll have a timeline and we'll show just how the project began. It was nice to talk to Amber at the beginning, and for Mark, he's been very helpful, and we've done quite a bit of things. So we'll talk about the timeline and show you some of the different things that have occurred, but we'll really get into flood risk management. And I believe that your community is doing an excellent job, and there are a couple of things you could do to level up, and you do have some flood risks. And so we'll present those. That's going to be the past flood mitigation work and the current flood hazards, and then we'll get to a bullet list that you can look at and consider what you might want to do moving forward. Next slide. Okay. So about the time Hurricane Katrina hit the nation, the Corps of Engineers reassessed its stance on risk management and came up with one thing, which was the Silver Jackets, where we evolved from this misconception that we have control of floods, and our terminology even changed from flood damage reduction down and then to flood risk management. And as part of that, we also realized we needed to work more with partners, because our agency doesn't always hold all the solutions. And so you can see in the slide here, it shows the different agencies responsible in Kansas for flooding and how we can work together to do some of the things you're already doing in your flood insurance program through people like Mark. And I think, Mark, are you the flood? Yeah, so he's the NFIP floodplain manager for the community too. So the legs on that stool are many of the things he handles as part of his job. But Silver Jackets is intended by the Corps to be like, let's network and connect the dots for communities so they can see where the best help is and the best solutions. Next slide. So going back to the beginning then, the city joined the NFIP in 1976. And since that time, the Corps of Engineers provided a lot of tools to a lot of communities across the United States to help understand their flood risk through tools like software packages like HECRAS, which we're really well known for. And we actually used that on this project. But then using those maps, you can do buyouts, and it looks like in 2006 there was a disaster grant that was taken advantage of, and we have a map of where where it was used on Spring Creek. There's been different flood events that have affected communities around Kansas City, and we're trying to figure out, we think maybe the 1998, does anybody remember the Chiefs versus the Seahawks game? The Dale Carter jumping in the mud. Anyways, yeah, that was the 1998 flood event, and I was probably 7 years old, and the Plaza flood happened in Kansas City. So, these different flood events, they don't affect every community in the metro area the same way. So we were trying to figure out what storm event may have caused some repetitive loss claims on Spring Creek, and it's kind of it's difficult to tell exactly which one it might have been. But it came to my attention through Tara Landsrath at DWR and through Stephanie Goodman at KDEM that there were some flood risks on Spring Creek that appeared in the Region L mitigation plan. And I think we saw another grant request or letter of interest, I'm sorry, for a brick grant from FEMA. And Stephanie Goodman shares that with the other interagency partners now as the Silver Jackets effort. So we're collaborating. And that's where I first became aware of it. And so we actually had the repetitive loss data too for all the communities in Kansas. And so we looked closer and I was like, I think you guys have a risk here you might want to look closer at, and you have some action items. And so we looked at these action items and we started digging into maybe the 2019 flood event, overtopping of K32, and then helped proceed with this Silver Jacket study in about 2023. And since that time, we've been able to assess the risk, which I'm going to show you some maps of, and we've had a public meeting. Mark has also helped to build a very good presentation on your internet site, and then we've done some mailers. Mark really did quite a few of those, and we helped provide like a fact sheet as well that I have one example of if you're interested in seeing. Next slide. So we kind of, I've done this so many times that I've sort of developed a graphic on it, and we can go into it if you have questions, but it basically starts with the risk assessment, evaluate the list of measures that are appropriate, and make a decision and target some actions you'd like to do in the future. In that process, we kind of figure out who's going to do what, so the roles and responsibility are always something we try and tie into it. And then the public involvement, of course, and sharing a map of the flood risks and things like that. And that process generally moves from left to right. Next slide. The authority that I work under is, as I said earlier when I started, the Floodplain Management Services Program. And this is 100% federal funded. So we were able to provide about $150,000 in the case of this project of technical analysis and services to provide you with a final product, and you can decide how you want to move forward with it. But anyways, this provides a little bit description, but like advise, recommend, raise understanding, inform, and provide technical support. It's really what should stand out there. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to show you some maps, and these maps are based on what we call the base flood. That will be what the Division of Water Resources uses to decide when to apply flood insurance and require it as part of a federal grant. It's not necessarily the best decision on what is safe. And one thing that we've learned as an interagency agreement is that talking in terms of a mortgage period, which is 30 years or so typically, that if you translate this 1% annual exceedance probability or base flood into a concept when you're looking at the 30-year and the risk that goes with it, then your actual probability of risk is about 1 in 4. It's actually 26%, which is kind of high. If you're a homeowner or a person that's seeking to buy a home, you don't want that to be a surprise if you buy your home. So there's different bullets here on how to talk about this risk. And when I deliver the report, which I've already given a draft report to him, I presented the risk in a lot of different ways so that you can talk to anybody that wants to come in. We've done some office hours, and if Mark needs any final tips from me, I'm happy to help. But there's different ways of talking about this flood risk and conveying it. All right, so next slide. So we had our modeler start with tailwater conditions on the Kansas River for various events, and then he modeled up Wolf Creek, and Wolf Creek is the connection between the Kansas River and Spring Creek. So it actually goes below the railroad track that, do I have a pointer? No. Okay. where it says road overtopping risk, that's, I think, 2nd Street. Yep. And the next bridge down gets closer to the railroad track. So that's all the culverts and bridges that connect down to the Kansas River are part of the updated HEC-RAS model, or the hydraulic model that we used to assess the most current conditions. And we noticed, and we coordinated with Division of Water Resources on the most current model too, and it did have the bridge update on CUMP in it. And so we made sure and updated all this to two-dimensional modeling, which is higher quality. And you can start to see, that Spring Valley Avenue, the residential homes at risk there. We have locations for various buyouts that have happened in 2006, and on the west side, at the intersection of Spring Valley Avenue and CUMP, are two of the first buyouts that are appearing on this slide here. Next slide. Where that one is, and in that area, that's where more of the buyouts are, or had been in the past. And so you see, I put a call out there for it. So when the buyouts occurred with the 2006 money, the actual demolitions, I don't think occurred maybe till around 2014. That's when Mark kind of remembers. And that makes sense, because sometimes these things, you would want to eventually clear it out. And what you have now is a very nice park along Spring Creek. And I think that's the kind of idea you would want to continue with. And you can see that the flood risk here is significant. And we also looked at different events. So we looked at the 10-year or the 10% annual exceedance probability, and that would be the design that they would use for some of these smaller roads, like, for example, Springdale. And all this is this kind of risk is put into the report, so you'll be able to see it if you're interested. One of the things we confirmed with some of the residents during the public meeting was the Kansas City, Kansas police officer that lives on Inslee, 322 Inslee, and he's confirmed that he's had severe flooding in the past, and he would be interested in a buyout. He actually confirmed during the public meeting. And let's move up to the next slide, and just moving upstream. We knew that there was more repetitive loss locations. There were some in the vicinity of the police officer's home too, but there was also two at the upstream end of our study area, and that was on the south side of the Metropolitan Avenue, which I believe Mark was saying at least one of those is maybe vacant now. And that's what brought our attention to originally, when we were working with DWR and KDEM to begin to help with this assessment in this project. Some of the comments, I did pull out some of them because there was quite a bit of comments from the public, but a lot of bank erosion, and I think talking with Bob, it's good to see you again, Bob. He was at the public meeting, and that was one of the main things we did here. And the type of rock that's provided is just really not the best quality. But erosion is not really the significant problem when it comes to flood risk. And so I think we can go to the next slide here. So this is what we looked at as possible solutions, and I call this the full menu of measures. So if you want to know what could be done for any of these flood projects that you run into across the nation, eliminated the coastal kinds of solutions, so you guys don't need to see those. But we definitely focused, because of the type of funding that I had available, on non-structural measures for buildings. That includes the elevation of buildings or the buyouts of them. This is the kind of thing that FEMA is well known for assisting with, buyouts or acquisitions. But there's other things that can be done, like relocation, flood-proofing, and, of course, risk communication. We didn't do it on this project, but a lot of my other Silver Jackets projects, I deal with flood warning systems and emergency evacuation plans and things like that. Some of those types of things I made sure and end up in the report to a certain degree. For example, with flood warning systems, you can rely on the Weather Service for the type of flash flooding you have on Spring Creek to maybe prepare initially for some of these road overtoppings, the 10-year flood that would overtop some of these roads, with simply using road closure signs or hazard signs. And they have a turnaround, don't drown campaign that you might take advantage of that's fully, I think it's, if they have signs, they can give those to you for free if you request them. While not part of the intent of the type of funding and the authority that I was looking at, which we call these interagency non-structural projects, is one of the floodplain management services, we still looked at your detention basins and your channel, and so I highlighted those in greens too, or in light blue. I highlighted those on the other side under floodwaters, because we knew that there was detention basins at the upstream end that needed to be, we wanted to make sure that they were accounted for in the hydraulic model we did. And then we knew that there was the idea of a proposed detention basin on Morse, and so we wanted to help assess that. While we can't build those things with these types of funds, the Corps is well known for building things, but for these types of funds, we're just trying to provide ideas on how to do the flood risk management. So trying to get you guys started. Bridge enlargements, of course, we did take out one of the alternatives. We took out all the bridges to see if that would have any effect on reducing some of these floodwaters, and it didn't really improve it. So we think that the problem, you have a very high rock ledge that's very shallow in the channel and doesn't allow you to deepen the channel and convey the water away from these homes. So in other words, it's a very flat area, and that's why when it rains really hard, it's going to fill up quick. Land treatment and infiltration is another idea, and those are the kinds of things. We looked at how those could affect the basin in the future. And anyways, so that's I call that the full menu of measures. That's your list of solutions that you could try. Next slide. So our economists are one thing we don't use very often to help the Kansas team, and so we were trying to encourage them that, you know, these kinds of projects would be good. And so you guys actually got one of the first or second probably projects where we did some very good economics for a community through our interagency non-structural projects. And since we have a lot of risk in the area, we wanted to leave you with maybe a small step. And so with one small buyout with just 4 residents, and nobody likes the idea of a buyout. You don't want to lose your tax base, and I understand that. But there are other opportunities too. What we wanted to do is to help you get an understanding that there is some opportunity, and we can start with a general understanding of a full buyout, which you would never do, but it helps you when you see the numbers to understand, and FEMA to understand that you're looking at the whole problem, and then when you come to them with a small step, one of the action items, like a small buyout, that you have a good understanding of your risk and your risk management and how you want to proceed. And so that's what we did with this idea of the small buyout. Otherwise, without the projects, the amount of expected annual damages is pretty high. And so we look at the flood damages prevented. So if you were to take, let's say the 2 houses up on Metropolitan and then one house near, it's actually the police officer's house, I think, and then one of the houses down on, I'm trying to remember the name of the next street south of there. If you just took a small step like that, then you can demonstrate to FEMA for one of their, what they call the BRIC grants, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, that cycle through every year. And Stephanie at KDEM has that now cycling at the end of June. So if that was something you wanted to do, you could leverage that. That's a 75% cost share through FEMA. But the Kansas Infrastructure Hub is going to be around for at least another year, and that takes care of the other 25%. So I don't know how much longer that money will be available. But you have all the ingredients now to take advantage of one of these if you want to. And so this report is going to be provided to Mark, and I think there may be another slide here. This is just an overview of the whole area and just kind of recap, you know. of the different things that we're facing. And what's the next slide after this? Okay, so then you could, since you're already in the community rating system under the National Flood Insurance Program, this is a special program that is not required. It helps, it's a FEMA program, but it drops the flood insurance premiums for anybody in your community when you're in it. So you guys are in it already. I don't know if you knew that, but you can change your class level in there with different things. And if you did with this list of actions here, you actually have the essence of a floodplain management plan. And so this report I'm going to give to Mark and to the city could be a great way to level up in the community rating system, at least one class, by doing a floodplain management plan. So there's things you've done already. I checked them off. That is very good. You guys are actually ahead of a lot of the communities in Kansas. 2-foot freeboard is another thing you guys have done is very admirable, and other communities I think need to consider. But then you can start with placing turnaround don't drown signs at 6 locations. That can help reduce risk in terms of flooding. It's a flashy stream. When it floods fast, you won't have time maybe to close a road. So by having those signs there, you can actually really help save lives. Then, like I said, another step you could take is the buyout of 4 residential homes, and I mentioned the cost shares again there for you. And then another thing you could do is adopt a flood risk management plan, or actually that's a continuation of the floodplain management plan. I guess in the first point, I was trying to say you can do near-term and long-term goals. So like what I'm showing you here are some near-term goals, and in the long term, you can decide, what else do we need to look at throughout the city? Because there's actually on Wolf Creek, your trailer park has a lot of risk too, and we didn't really get into that. So there might be a need for a more comprehensive flood risk management plan that you guys might be interested in. And by the way, if you guys are interested in further help, you can apply to our floodplain management services again. There's no limit to how many times you ask for help. And then there's a check mark at the end. We will provide a summary of and we can help. I'm trying to get our economists to help Mark too, if you guys are interested in applying for that BRIC grant as well. Next slide. Okay. It's bad news. I know you don't want to, we don't want. It's better to know these things though and not be surprised. So I understand that this could be bad news, and it's a little overwhelming.
I know there's a couple of us who were on the council when we did that original buyout back in the late 20-odd years. We took several houses, both, I think 2 or 3 houses on the south side of Comp, and 2 or 3, 4 homes on the north side. And it was always a hard decision, having people saying we're going to move you out, but I think it was always probably for the best. When you talk about for those 4 homes,
there's a map of that if you wanted to go into the
I think
slides.
we're okay there. For those 4 homes that you're talking about, from what you were showing, are those able to then be fully funded at this point in time if we're awarded the grant money?
Yeah.
That it wouldn't be any, because I have to also think on the cost for the city taxpayers, because anything we were to buy out, if it comes out of our funds, then that actually goes and translates to our residents. They're picking up the tab for that. So, but
The way I understand the infrastructure hub in Kansas is it will provide up to 25%. I think I know that there are some little things to be aware of, like FEMA wants somebody that's going to manage the grant. So there's going to be some time on your end for your floodplain manager or somebody to, kind of field the ball, make sure that everything goes right, and then, then there'll be the demolitions.
got you. Questions? Want to start down there with you, Mr. Shannon?
Thank you. I can refer to a page here. It would be on page 26. I don't know if that helped you or not, but it was the new flood maps. and there was a lot of red diamonds and red X's. I tried to figure out what those
Sure.
represented.
Can we, who's running the slides? 26? Slide 26 is near the end. Yeah, and we went by that one map. Oh, maybe it was, let's go back slowly and he'll tell you which slide. I think I
you
know
passed
this one.
it, Chris.
Yeah, you did. Keep going.
One more.
Okay, yeah, there was that one, and I think the preceding one before it, yeah. What do those X's and diamonds represent?
So we did some plan formulating with the different measures, and we said, well, what could you do on a, just, you wouldn't do it, but if you could do everything, what would you need to do to have no risk? And since you already had the idea of like a park starting at the bottom end, and people, you know, we've been out in the field and I've seen people walking and they enjoy the trail, you know. And so we were like, well, then the homes at risk, let's put, if you wanted to buy them out, an X on them. If you wanted to elevate them, let's put a triangle on them. And I think Bob had mentioned the one on Lakewood is it's on the south side of the creek, so it's the first X, and then there's a series of triangles. And then our economist has a lot more detail than I thought I would get to tonight that will be provided, but certain homes have more risk, and he was saying, he suggested that, like I suggested 4, and he goes, I like 3 of your 4, but I want to switch one of them as an easy, put it in the hoop, you know, first thing you could do in June if you really wanted to take advantage of it. And so he recommended the one down on, I can't remember the name of the street. What's the first street? Alley? North of Cump? Anyways, I think it might be, is it Springdale? North of Cump? Mm-hmm. Okay. Go up a slide here. And
Spring
maybe
Valley
more.
is south, Springdale is north.
See, now you can see, it would have been one of those in the area I called Reach 2. But yeah, that's what the symbols are for.
On the Reach 2 area, or it could have been either Highview or Inslee.
Go one more slide up. Let me see. I put some arrows. It was Highview.
Oh,
Yep,
Highview.
That's right. That's okay. All right, okay. Any other questions?
By raising, you mentioned the word raising. What do you mean by raising? Is that lowering the creek, or is it, I don't picture raising the houses, but
Right. And I'm not thinking of anything like what you see on the coast, but you've seen on the beach, some of these beach houses on stilts. And we wouldn't do that around
No.
here, but we can do elevation on stem walls. And so, believe it or not, it's not very hard to relocate a structure or to elevate it. There's a lot of contractors now that can do this kind of thing across the nation, so it's not uncommon. But we were just talking about 1 foot stem walls or 2 foot, whatever it would take, depends on the finished floor of this resident and in respect to your freeboard ordinance, whether it would need to go 2 to 3 feet up. And so like we figured that the idea of a wider floodplain would be the first thing you would want to do, and then you would have some sort of offer to help elevate. And I think FEMA does elevations as well. It's just a little more sticky wicket. So you have to decide how much, how complicated you want to get. But it will vary.
okay. Thank you.
And I have a lot of details on that too, so I can share that. And I'm going to have an appendix to the report that shows some nice cross sections if you're into the schematics and things.
It helps.
Be careful what you ask for, because I'll give you what you want.
Go ahead, Mr. Gibb.
You already gave us a 191-page report, so that's plenty. How does the process move forward? Does the city just decide to apply for the grants and talk to the homeowners? And that seems like a lengthy process to get done by June. Do we have capacity? Can we even do that? I mean, I don't understand that process.
I'm not super familiar with the FEMA grant process, but I would think that we would need to make that decision first as a council, and then Mark and his staff would move forward with the grant application for both FEMA and the Kansas grant if we wanted to do that.
Okay, thank you.
certainly determining whether there's, nobody wants to condemn. So I would think you would be like, is there any willing sellers? And then you might reconsider the 4, for example.
They don't want to sell, they don't want to sell.
And I think they get a pretty good value out of it. I mean, the police officer was saying, we've fled enough times. We don't want to be here.
Is that same money used to raise the houses or that other, or is that strictly for?
Now, at this point, I would have to defer to FEMA. So my expert at FEMA just retired in January, believe it or not. And so, but there's a bunch of staff members over there that have reached out to me, and I can connect you guys, and they'll be able to tell you all the ins and outs.
Okay, thank you.
That sort of answered one of my questions. If any of those properties doesn't want to sell, then what do we do then? We have to go through condemnation? Do we?
Nothing says the properties have to be removed.
So
We got
what
rid of
is, and this is just a question of ignorance on my part, what is the city's liability in this situation?
Oh, I'm not a lawyer.
So the majority of those are in the floodplain already. So they're at a flood risk right now as it stands today, and they're fully aware of that. You're only required to have flood insurance, required to if you have a federally backed mortgage. So there may be some people, if they don't have a mortgage, they don't even have flood insurance. But what Brian was looking at was just the overall risk up and down the stream. They did do some new modeling that change. I don't want to say that. It doesn't change the map. The map is adopted through FEMA, and they're the ones that say, yes, we want this. Through their analysis, they determined that the floodplain maybe is a little wider in some spots than others. And to be honest, it may not even be that deep, but it's still just repetitive loss. I mean, there's one image there that I can't remember if it was a police officer's car or not, but it was just right on Spring Creek, and the car's almost underwater. So, it's not that they flood deep all the time, but they flood consistently, we'll say. I mean, there was just one 4th of July last year.
And what's our liability in that situation?
I mean, honestly, it's none,
Okay.
to my understanding, because they're already in the floodplain
Okay.
and they know this risk already. What we're saying is that if you guys would choose
Right.
this option, that
Right.
it's there.
For the betterment of the city in general?
Yeah, it depends on how you,
Okay.
But again, like Brian said, you go to someone and say, I don't want to, I want to be here type thing. We can't change that.
That helps, thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Ms. Wood?
No, I don't have any because they're coming up with the stuff. It's a frightening situation, though.
Thank you. Mr. McMahon?
Yeah, Brian, thanks for putting this together. And I'll be honest with you, this is kind of like an aha moment for me, seeing all this. Mark, how long has this area been recognized as a floodplain area? Is it 1800s or something? No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
I mean, I would
It's
imagine.
been a minute,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean,
So-
as far as I know, it's always been in the floodplain ever since we joined the NFIP, so.
Gotcha. So the city's really not, like you just to reiterate, we're not liable, right? Brian, what kind of diversion program do we have? I mean, to reduce, preventing, it's an act of God, right? You don't know how much rain we're going to get at any one. I think I do remember that football game where they got just a torrential
I
downpour.
think that was in 04 or 03.
Oh, yeah, and they paused the game or something, but at any rate, what are our options? I mean, I'm looking at, you talked about, I made a note, the bottom of these creek is like rock and stuff, so that creates an additional expense if we want to try to, widen or deepen the pathway. So are there some value or some other options that potentially that wouldn't create an exorbitant expense to the city, or is this something FEMA's picking up?
We talked about a detention basin, and we looked at the space that's available on the south side of Morse, on a tributary that goes a little bit to the northwest, and connects about the midpoint, about where
I think
Reach
that's a
3
good
is.
idea. Detention, right?
Except,
But the findings were it's not enough volume, and when you look at the area that you need for the embankment, I've built a lot of these detention basins in my 20, 30 years for different consulting firms before I would join the Corps. So there's the footprint of the dam too, and then you have a dam, you have to maintain the risk for that as well. So you have additional
I was going to say,
operation.
where that tributary comes in is long past probably 80% of the properties that are in risk areas, so.
Where can you put like culverts and stuff, right?
Yeah, and then there's the idea of looking at widening and expanding culverts that are there, and we did do some of that, but like the example that Kump showed, that we widened that and it didn't have any effect at all.
Right.
So it's more of a conveyance that's got to do with that channel itself and getting the water out, and it's also the slope. You get into the engineering of it all, there's slope and a lot of other factors. And the slope is very flat through that area as well. And then there's a layer of rock that's right there also.
Right. It just seems like reactionary. I mean, now we're looking at it in 2025, and it's like, wow, maybe we shouldn't have built those houses over there. So, but you just never know. But there seem to be a lot of X. Just looking at the diagram, I know not everybody can see it that's here, but there's a lot of X's and stuff.
Right. And that's why I put it at the back, because it's like this would be the case that you wouldn't do all this. But we wanted to know as a first take what kind of a return on the investment would there be, and the benefit cost ratio was high. So like any combination of things that you could do inside is probably going to be pretty well. So even though you wouldn't do that worst case one. So that's why I put it at the back.
So you got multiple mitigation plans, I take it, or?
I've seen a lot of flooding, worked with City of Manhattan and Rossville and different communities around Kansas and continue to do it. But one thing, it feels like a surprise, but as we understand our flood risk better and better with the tools we have, and the digital trends and technology are getting better and better, the algorithms and hardware, we can look at these, we can model these situations much quicker now. And so we were able to provide all this because of the changes in technology. But it isn't any wonder that, some bad decisions were made in the past, and that's because nobody knew the extent of flooding, and you would have had to have been there for long enough to know. The Native Americans were telling us, I know that river floods from bluff to bluff. There were some records of things like that, but any particular creek, who knew, Also worked with Harrisonville on some solutions over here on the Missouri side, and they went ahead. They did have a situation where we were able to recommend that the detention basin would work, but this particular location is not a good location. It's not big enough, and we did include the detention basin up north of Metropolitan Avenue, so its effects are included. There are some detention upstream of that, some privately owned farm ponds and things like that. But the watershed itself goes all the way up to, what's the name of it? Is it Walmart?
It's past Walmart, yeah. It kind of starts at Walmart and comes all the way down under the highway, and then there's a big detention pond north of Metropolitan. That captures most of the water, but it still comes down out of there quick. And then like Brian said,
Mark, I can't hear you. Couldn't hear you. You were too
I'm
far
sorry,
away.
Bob. That's what I just thought. So that area, it starts all the way up by Walmart, comes all the way down, hits that big detention pond, and then comes out from there. I think kind of like what Brian alluded to a little bit is that area is just in a valley. I mean, pretty much all the way from Metropolitan all the way down is just a valley. So everything's just even from the sides is coming down into there, and it just gets into that creek and goes from there. But yeah, I mean, like,
I think you see something like Lions Park, and it's in the right spot for a community to have a park where you're keeping your residents away, and you have an area that can flood, and people
Well, I
won't be there.
think that was a lake at one time.
No, the lake was north of.
Was it north there?
North of Morse, yeah.
Okay, close to it.
that's something that probably if it had remained, it may have helped. But instead,
So blame it on Bob.
Yeah. Guy's been around the longest. So is this just more of an awareness
Well, for
meeting,
tonight,
or
it's just, yeah.
we're going to be making decisions at some point in time?
So this is really the wrap-up of the grant program that we got, and so this is their final report to us, and so we wanted to at least get it to you guys to have. It's an action plan that we can use moving forward. We'll put it that way. We don't have to do anything tomorrow. If we can get in to get some grants by June, then, good for us, but it's just a plan that we'll start using moving forward.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you both.
Ms. Black?
Hi, thank you for being here. Yesterday, I watched an interesting interview with the president, and this new administration has been very vocal about the interest of abolishing FEMA. So what does that look like in regards to grants, studies, partnerships in the NFIP?
Good question.
If that were to happen,
That's a big
I know they're saying
speculation.
they're wanting to give it back to the states. So, I mean, clearly FEMA has extraordinary funding and resources that comes into play, not just in natural disasters, but in helping to prevent them, which is what we're talking about tonight. So is that I know you said you just recently retired, so congratulations.
No, not me.
Oh, not you.
The FEMA guy did.
Oh,
Joe
you're like, I
Chan.
wish it was me.
Joe
Have you had any, I know we're just now into the new term, but have you had any discussions about if that does happen or if FEMA's defunded or just simply abolished? What does that look like?
I haven't had a chance to talk to my counterparts at FEMA since that, but we are presenting on Wednesday and I'll see them, so I'm sure and ask. But it won't be good because, the kinds of grants and the things that BRIC has been able to do, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, the way they've figured out how to leverage disasters dollars to the advantage of what we call mitigating the flood hazard is important. And, as I said earlier, our understanding of the flood risk is, our eyes are opening as we make more and more of the maps across these states. Like I've watched this over the past 20 years. I'm a certified floodplain manager, not because I need to be, but because I know my state partners. I know they need to know. I know what they're doing and how they work with people that are doing the floodplain management in the communities. And so I've seen how the map process has been gradually growing, but it's, it could be faster. But at the same time, there's commercial entities out there that are, is it First Street? I can't remember if I told you about this, but anyways, there's apps on the internet already where they're mapping this for any consumer that wants to pay, and they already have it, so they're going to see all this. The public can go, and any of you can go to the DWR's map, which I put links to, and there's actually a slide that demonstrates it in the back. DWR keeps a nice floodplain viewer that shows you your flood risk. So people can see their risk, but what are we going to do about it? And that's why we need the FEMA grants, to get back to answering your question.
I guess my question is if FEMA disappears tomorrow, is it something where we go through a private insurer and get our own studies made and just figure it out on our own?
You would have to pay the 75%.
I mean, it's okay.
If you go back to the table, the implications are in the table because you would have to pay 75% of that.
Mm.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of us knows what's
going to happen
tomorrow. So I can't really answer that one, Emily. But I will tell you, though, you said something that kind of struck me as not funny, but odd in a way. And I'll just say this because I'm not exactly sure, but whichever one of you represents south of Kump around Spring Valley, and that area, not a one of those individuals came into our meetings, not a one of them. And that whole neighborhood is at risk of flood, and they have flooded. I went door to door and delivered the information for our first meeting, and it was just, I found it very odd that not a one of those came in. That's just, when you said, I can't remember what you said now, but something about the people unaware or whatnot, but it's like they just chose to not even come in to find out about it. It was strange.
I think it's a common theme right now that people don't care about issues until it directly affects them.
And that's actually what I mentioned to them when they all looked at me and asked me that too. I said, I think they haven't been impacted, so it doesn't affect them right now. So, yeah.
I know my question was broad, and it's one of those day-by-day things. I think as we have these opportunities and these surveys and these partnerships, which are awesome, and you guys do incredibly important work with a lot of important information. Not that the studies would go away, right? Those are facts that exist, but I think I'm just more so of what happens when this money goes away or this assistance goes away. So, fingers crossed.
Our funding program, we do different kinds of mitigation, and so we build the big features. So hopefully they don't minimize us, but they did freeze all of our federal hiring abilities. So we're like, we want to be able to help. And I will be going to the Kansas Hazard Mitigation Team, which is going to be March 2nd, and I'll tell them that we had we gave you guys a good report, and you guys can do, and we'll move on to the next list. And we do projects like flood warning systems. We just finished one in Ottawa. We're doing one in Salina and Humboldt. And that's a great Silver Jackets partnership with Weather Service and USGS, where we take a gauge and we put a flood map like you saw for different degrees of stages, and there's all kinds of useful products that we're providing through the Silver Jackets and the Kansas Hazard Mitigation Team. So,
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Ms. Long?
Thank you so much for your time. I don't have any questions that haven't already been asked.
Okay. Mr. Reeves?
Yeah, I'm noticing the map there on page 26. Okay, does that take into account the way it's showing there, the way it's flooded on the map? Does that take into account the detention pond up there? So in other words, it's that you had a dam failure. Excuse me, I didn't mean to say that.
Right, it's not a dam break map. It's actually, this is the flow that is being passed through during it, and that is the maximum extents during the peak of the storm.
Because we've had some pretty bad rains now. It was like this back in '77, but since that time, and especially since '99 when they put the detention pond in, it hasn't gotten out of the creek. And we've had some pretty severe up on that north end. Now, I think maybe down south it has gotten out, but not up on that north end. So I was just wondering about that, because it shows there that it's out, So is that like a 500-year?
No, we're just showing the 1% event there. So in other words, the 1% annual exceedance probability, which is the base flood, which you commonly see on the flood maps. And we only showed that to be, we knew we had a limited amount of time. We can show you different events.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll include a map like I think the 10-year or something like that in the report too, so that you can see. But we also might include the 500-year. And you don't want to see that one.
That's all. I didn't have any more.
Well, might ask you too, we talked about buyouts of homes. And this might be more towards staff. Do we have ideas, thoughts of what we can do to also help remediate the flow? Is the problem start at the top end, or is it because the water is not able to convey downstream fast enough? Is that one of the reasons why we end up with the water flooding up towards the northern side?
We looked at taking out the bridges all the way down to the railroad. Now, the railroad bridge we didn't take out, but it's fairly large. It's it's this gigantic corrugated, I don't know if I've been out there and I've seen it. It's very large, and then it drops down into the floodplain. But working with the railroad is a notoriously bad partner.
Oh, we know.
So, when it comes to Silver Jackets, they're not on the partner.
Well, I know when we rebuilt Cump here, we got rid of the culverts and built a bridge. Now, that structure is fine, but we have a lot of that. The Spring Creek then meanders down through a lot of city property down past it. Is there things we can do within Spring Creek, possibly even with Second Street, that might help convey that water a little bit better through there?
I don't think so, because the main problem is the rock ledge, and then there's the thing that if you decide to start widening the floodplain or something, and you're dealing with a floodplain permit, then you have to deal with mitigating the environment. And you're affecting. So you get all these trade-offs, and I've seen this for 20 years, and it's like, what is the easiest thing to do? And many of the...
Well, it's not about the easiest thing, but what can we do that provides the best solution? So, yeah. But in this case, it wouldn't necessarily be.
No, I think probably one of the easiest things right off the bat we can do is just be able to get, I don't know, maybe some kind of warning system, something that we can let those individuals know sooner. I mean, it's not going to save their property, but it's going to save them, things like that. But yeah, I mean, and listening to what Brian and his team found with the rock bottom of the creek, the only thing we'd probably do is widen it, and then that's going to cause a whole nother issue of other problems. So I don't, it's not completely in my wheelhouse to come up with those new ideas like that, because they got the engineers and all that, but, you know, it appears as though there's one thing really.
Okay.
Okay,
I was going to say, any other
I've
questions?
got another one. On the north end of that, where the rock that is on the sides and in the bottom of the bed, that's deteriorated, especially on the sides, and it's falling into it now. So that's raised the bottom of the creek. Yeah. I think that in places like that, that could be cleared out and go and put new rock, substantial better rock than what we've had there. I've mentioned that before, and I'm just kind of bringing that up again.
Yep. So that was, Brian and his team didn't look at anything like real structural. You know, they did throw the detention pond in there just kind of as a gift to me, I think, when I threw it out, and they were hoping maybe it would slow it down, and it didn't pan out that way. So they didn't look at, there's some gabion walls and stuff that have been built up to the north that, like Bob mentioned, are starting to fall apart, things like that. They didn't really look into those types of structures. That can be done on a separate program. Okay. And so we can start looking at that stuff too. But yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
But I will tell you that if you're going to add rock, you're going to add resistance. So if you don't add something smoother, you don't get the water out as fast. So the erosion.
Okay, well, I understand that too, but the rock, they put rock in there on the sides. Yep. And it deteriorated. Now it's on the bottom, which doesn't help.
Yeah. And when we place rock, and I told you this, but for everybody else's edification, I did the emergency stream bank program at the Corps for 5 or 6 years, and we use a kind of rock that is called the Bethany Falls ledge, and you don't see any iron in it. It looks like quartz, and it's white. It's very strong, and that stuff doesn't break down. So we're kind of extreme, but KDOT knows something in the middle. They have a different spec. But whatever that stuff was like, it froze a couple times and just disintegrated. It was like shale. Terrible choice, yeah.
I was going to say, besides north of Morris, then we have where it meanders down through the park. I know we've had a lot of erosion through there. One of the things I noticed in your report, you mentioned about potentially concrete lining. And I don't know if that really is a solution for our community or not in some of those areas where we have those high banks where there's lots of erosion.
Yeah, that's, while it has the tendency to be a smoother surface and lower Manning's in value, concrete can be expensive to build.
Right.
And then, you know, we did have some people saying in the public meeting how they really liked the natural state of the channel and they wanted to see more pools and riffles. So that would be contrary to that, you know. So then you're back, you know, deciding what is best is not one person's interpretation, right? So
may not be aesthetically pleasing to some.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But
other
it could be
comments,
assessed, you know. The cost for somebody could do that cost assessment besides me.
Any other comments, questions from anyone? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Rasterson.
Yes,
Thank you, Rast. Thank you very much for your time and your presentation. And
thank you.
We've got some decisions we'll have to be making down the road here real soon.
Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Okay, on with the next part of the meeting, the citizens' concerns about items not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the council? Seeing none, I will move on to the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of January 13, 2025 special city council meeting and the claims for city operations. Is there anything from the staff to pull? Anything from the residents who wish to have pulled? Anything from council that wishes to have pulled? If not, I would accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Blanks and a second by Mr. Reeves. Roll, please.
Gurley?
Yes.
Kip?
Yes.
Reeves?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Long?
Yes.
McMahon?
Yes.
Blanks?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, on to item number 1, our new business. We have a public hearing to issue industrial revenue bonds for Skinnell Properties LLC, Building Number 2. Is there any ex parte communications or any other disclosures that need to be made by anyone? Seeing none, I would go ahead and accept a motion to open the public meeting. Specify the time as well.
Mayor, I make a motion to open a public hearing at 8:28 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Gurley and a second by Mr. Shannon. So if roll, please. Vote, please.
Kip?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
Long?
Yes.
Blanks?
Yes.
McMahon?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Reeves?
Yes.
Gurley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And with that, staff.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tyler Ellsworth with the Kutak Rock Law Firm, the city's bond counsel. We have 2 agenda items this evening. The first 2 agenda items that relate to the Skinnell Building 2 project. So the public hearing is in connection with a property tax abatement on the Building 2 project. Building 2 is approximately the northwest quarter of the Compass 70 Logistics Center at 110th and Riverview. So state statute requires that we provide notice and hold a public hearing when the city considers a property tax abatement. We've done this before, even for other buildings in this Skinnell Logistics Park. So tonight we have in your agenda packet a cost-benefit analysis, and that looks at whether the benefits of the project outweigh the costs of providing the incentives. And so I won't go through the detail of that report because it's in your agenda packet, but suffice it to say that for each of the tax jurisdictions that analysis looked at, the city, the state of Kansas, Wyandotte County, the school district, Kansas City Community College, they all had benefits that outweighed the costs. And beyond that, the payback period that the analysis looked at for each of those jurisdictions was less than 10 years. So very positive financial results. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but that's essentially a high-level summary of the cost-benefit analysis.
Is there someone from Skinnell who would like to speak on this at all?
Hi, I'm Tyler Weissong, Skinnell Properties. I'm here to represent the developer. We're very excited about the park. Our building 2 is currently under construction. The walls are up and got about half the roof up right now. So excited about that project and excited about the continued development of the park. So just thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Weissong. Is there anybody from the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I would go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing at 8:31 p.m.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Shannon, a second by Ms. Long. Vote, please.
Kip?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Gurley?
Yes.
McMahon?
Yes.
Reeves?
Yes.
Long?
Yes.
Blanks?
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to item number 2 of this item. Resolution of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds for Skinnell Properties, LLC, Building 2. I would accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to adopt the resolution to intent to issue industrial revenue bonds and property tax abatement for Skinnell Properties, LLC, Building 2.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Shannon, a second by Ms. Gurley. Vote, please.
Reeves?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
McMahon?
Yes.
Blanks?
Yes.
Kip?
Yes.
Gurley?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
Long?
Yes.
Motion passes.
My apologies. I'd like to have that withdrawn because I should have asked for, they did not get a chance to comment. So, if everybody's okay with that, we're going to rescind that last motion and vote, and let's start our
Or just the
comments.
vote.
Yes. Was that?
Just rescind the vote.
Yeah, if that's okay with everyone, we'll rescind the vote. And Mr. Reeves, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I have nothing to add.
Nothing to add.
Come on, don't do this to me, people.
You didn't ask if we had comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but no questions. Thanks, Tyler.
Mr. McMahon?
In terms of filling the buildings and getting leases, how are we doing in that department?
That's a fair question. I'll defer to Mr. Wysong to answer that.
Thank you.
Yes, as far as the spec building, we've had several tenants and do proposals for the spec space as it's being built. So currently getting some activity on the building as it's under construction. So
just weighing your options.
Yeah, we're responding to the proposals as they come in for potential tenants too. So they haven't made decisions on those yet, but touring the space and
that's for the first building or both?
That's the speculative building that's currently under construction. Okay. The other buildings are built to suit, so therefore the specific tenant's proposed use.
I'll say the thing to get not confused is even though it says building 2, it's actually going to be the third building because they're based upon their lot configurations. So those other 2 buildings, are they 4 and 5 or 3 and 4?
They're 3 and 4, yeah.
3 and 4.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stay there.
Ms. Woods?
Have any questions? Nope.
Ms. Gurley?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the tenancy, if you don't mind. There are 5 buildings total being planned.
Yes.
And are any of them secured with tenants at this time?
The build to suit, yeah, the first 2 buildings are secured. Those buildings are being built for those specific tenants.
Okay.
So those secured tenants.
Do you have any guesstimated completion dates on any of those buildings?
I don't have them on me right now. Sorry, it's about probably spring of this year. Yeah.
Within a reasonable amount of time. We're not looking at another year.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah. No problem.
No question.
No questions.
I might mention one thing here. Looking at the reports, with this property being right on a city boundary line, sometimes some of those figures, even though they say sales tax for Bonner, they talk about utilities, those really wouldn't have much of effect for our community in Bonner because most of those dollars would be spent probably in the UG. That's what I was going to mention. I also wanted to mention is on the utilities. We'd be looking at receiving money from them for water utilities, but the sewer utility will actually benefit our neighbors right next door in Edwardsville. In fact, how will that handle the billing for the sewer handle? Does Edwardsville bill us and then we bill the tenants, or is that directly billed to the tenants over there from Edwardsville?
I believe our agreement with Edwardsville that we put together a couple of years ago, I believe they bill us and we bill the tenants.
Gotcha. But I think it's important to note that this will actually benefit our neighbors directly to the east.
Right, for sure.
Any other questions, comments? Now, how about would somebody like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds and property tax abatement for Scanell Properties, LLC, Building 2.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Shannon, a second by Mr. Kipp. Okay, now we'll call for the vote.
Gurley?
Yes.
Blanks?
Yes.
Kip?
Yes.
McMahon?
Yes.
Reeds?
Yes.
Long?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And hopefully we're all okay on all this, Ms. Break. We're okay on everything. I got little things out of order, so. Okay, well, on to item number 3, the fire department engine purchase.
Mayor, council members, Tim Richards, Fire Chief, just stand before you for a request to enter into an agreement with Conrad Fire for the purchase of a fire engine. This will be moving our current frontline engine that's a 2009 that's 16 years old. It will move it into a reserve status, and this new engine would take its place as our primary unit that we would run out on fire and medical incidents. Again, it's with Conrad Fire, who we've had a long relationship with, purchasing fire trucks with the city, and I would stand for any questions you might have.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of a Type 1 fire engine from Conrad Fire Equipment for an amount not to exceed $1 million.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Gurley, a second by Mr. Shannon, and we'll start here with you, Mr. McMahon.
Was this already cut into the budget?
Yes, it's part of our CIP program.
Okay, that just confirmation on that. No, that sounds great. Thank you for what you're doing.
Ms. Woods?
I appreciate I appreciate all the work that you do.
Yes, ma'am.
And whatever equipment you need to do it.
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Gibb?
Do we currently have two, and one's going away and this one's going into reserve, the old one?
We currently have one engine and one aerial that we bought, that you guys all bought last year. This is just another fire engine, a regular fire truck, if you will. The current one that we're using will move into a reserve status, and that will be what we'll use when the frontline truck is out of service for maintenance, or oftentimes when we have calls, fire calls that are going to be long-term, our off-duty folks will come in and they would staff that reserve engine, so we still have fire coverage in the city.
Does that add a lot of extra expense, having an extra vehicle?
Yes, but I think the expense is worth it as far as risk, community risk that we have. The fire engines, which is a normal fire truck, and the aerial ladder truck that we bought last year, serve very different purposes on an emergency scene. The cost of maintaining an apparatus like that is, I could get you figures on that, what we spent over the last, the whole lifetime of that truck that we've had. It does add cost to maintain an older apparatus like that, but the feeling of myself is that we need to have that reserve truck, if you will, to still serve the city when our newer truck is out of service, getting oil change, anything like that. And again, if we have a large fire, or not even a large fire, a house fire, or we have an auto extrication call, we can call off-duty folks to come in to staff that other fire truck, so we still maintain fire coverage in our city.
Because it always seems part of the logic is, getting the new equipment is because the old equipment costs so much to maintain, but now we're keeping the old equipment and adding that plus that. That's the part that confuses me a little bit. Yeah,
I think you're absolutely correct. It does cost to save, to maintain that. Now, our maintenance costs on this 2009, I think, engine that we currently have will go down quite a bit, since we won't be using it every day for our normal calls. But this is very much a standard in the fire service to have. Some departments have different ratios, but we'll really just have one reserve truck for our frontline truck.
Yeah, because of course we want you to have all the equipment in the world. That's never a question, but it just seems that we're going to full-time, and all the improvements that you've made. Tilly, do we have all the money? Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Tim, thank you for all you're doing, and really looking out for our city and our families and everything, and having the backup, that does sound good, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Langs?
Hi, Chief. Not to jump ahead, because I know you're our line item number 4, but how much bigger equipment do you see us needing to spend this year or next year?
With this, so before you got on the council, it was, and when I got here a couple years ago, we hadn't spent money on buying fire apparatus for quite a few years. That's why this seems like we're in this phase where we just spent a whole lot of money. We're getting ready to spend a whole lot of money again. This truck that we're currently buying should last 20 years. So I outside of expanding the fire department to buy another big purchase like this, I hate to say that $1 million number because it's just a little staggering, but we're probably talking, outside of us expanding our capabilities, another 15 years before we're buying $1 million apparatus, and I don't even want to think about what they'll be at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Long?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Reeves?
Yeah, if this passes, Chief, what's the date that we can take delivery? It's a stock item, I understand.
It's a stock item, and that can mean a lot of things at the manufacturing plant. It can mean that they have some frame rails there and they have all the metal available. I think the earliest we could see this would be probably in August or September. The latest,
so
December,
it's not
January.
sitting on the lot. That's
No,
what I didn't
it's
figure it was.
right. It's still just probably on paper, and there's steel sitting there that has this number on it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Just go ahead.
do we have an empty bay to store both
Yes.
of those? Okay, thank you.
That was what I was going to ask, to
sorry.
make sure we were going to be storing up there. And then I was also going to follow it up with, and where that bay where it would be stored still has all the proper safety equipment for the diesel fuel.
Yep, all the
fumes and
exhaust
such.
fumes and all that. Yes, sir.
Great. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I would call for a vote then.
Wood,
Yes.
McMahon,
Yes.
Long, Kip,
Yes.
Gurley,
Yes.
Shannon,
Yes.
Reeves,
Yes.
Blanks.
Yes.
Motion passes.
I tell you, thank you, Chief, but I think you're staying around for the next one as
Yes, sir.
well.
Yes,
So,
sir.
Fire Department ambulance purchase. Staff?
Yes, just much like the last item, we're seeking approval to purchase an ambulance from Pinnacle Emergency Vehicles for an amount not to exceed $400,000. It's much like the last. This is just an effort to modernize our fleet. As I discussed earlier with Ms. Blanks, we went quite a few years without buying large apparatus or ambulances, so this is just an effort to get us up to speed. This will be replacing a 2016 unit that was purchased. And as you can imagine, ambulances, whether it's transporting to Providence or down to KU, they get a lot more miles on them than a fire truck does, and they run a lot more calls than the fire truck does. So again, this is just an effort to modernize our fleet and kind of reduce some of those big maintenance costs that we're starting to see on this older unit as it ages. So I stand for any questions.
Is there anybody from the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of an ambulance from Pinnacle Emergency Vehicles for an amount not to exceed $400,000.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Shannon, a second by Mr. Reeves. We'll start here with you, Ms. Blanks.
No questions. Thanks, Chief.
Ms. Long?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Reeves?
No questions.
Mr. McMahon?
None.
None, but thank you.
Yep.
I'm scanning through. What will happen to the existing unit?
We will sell that on an auction.
Is there a
We
market?
we
Is there
just
still a
recently,
market for 'em?
yes, we just recently sold our older ambulance that we replaced last year. It just recently sold in an online auction that our city clerk handled.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kip? Shannon?
Chief, when I have no problem with this at all. I just had a couple of questions. What is the life expectancy of ambulances?
That's kind of a little bit of a loaded question. I think on our, and I can get you all a copy of a apparatus replacement plan.
I'm just kind of curious. 'Cause
Yeah,
it
I
seems
think we're lucky to get 8 to 10 to 12 years out of one. It's of course dependent on a lot of factors.
What is in your opinion, what is the difference between the 2016 and the the new one? I know that there's a lot of things, but what are some of the things you're seeing?
The inside of the back of the ambulance is a little bit bigger. There's been some redesigns, so the care attendant at the back, the EMT or the paramedic that's caring for the individual in the back, can be close to the patient and close to equipment that they might need, radios they may need. There's, of course, all the technological changes that have occurred from any type of vehicle from 2016 till today. Safety, they all have airbags, but airbags and some of the safety items. As you know, the four-wheel drive systems are much better now. The ability for the chassis to hold that amount of weight is a little increased with the newer vehicles. Emissions for exhaust and all those things have improved over the 8 years.
Yeah, because that was a couple of the things that I had noted on this that was mentioned, rapid acceleration and under load, and I'm going, okay. I figured I needed to have that explained to me, and then I thought, no, you don't need to. This pretty much answered my question, so thank you.
Well, if you consider a 1 ton, 1.5 ton pickup truck that is always has a load on it, that wears those chassis out very quickly, and those boxes on the back of those ambulances are relatively heavy. So they're vehicles that are used a lot. They're very important to a community, but they're driven hard too, just because there's all that weight on them.
Again, thank you for looking out for our families and our patients. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Chief, for that presentation. I have no questions this evening on it. Is there any other comments, questions? Seeing none, I would go ahead and call for a vote.
Reeves?
Yes.
Kip?
Yes.
Long?
Yes.
McMahon?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
Gurley?
Yes.
Blanks?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Chief.